Hi, everyone. This is Stella. I have the great honor of interviewing my hero, Itzhak Perlman, for the Violin Channel's VC Hero series. So thank you, Mr. P, for taking the time to do this with me. It's
My
such an
pleasure.
honor.
My pleasure.
How are you doing during this quarantine
Well,
situation?
I've been practicing a little bit, and it's I've been here like since March, and it's quite weird, but it's an experience, and but it's very interesting. I've been practicing things that I never played when I was playing. I never played those things, so I'm practicing them right now, and I still can't play them. So, and I said, wait a second. Maybe it's because I'm getting old. No, it's because I could never play these pieces. So now it becomes a challenge to things to do these pieces, and eating a lot, cooking a lot. But anyway, that's my story.
Sounds very productive. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about, well, obviously you are, you know, probably the defining virtuoso of our time and have just accomplished so much. And I was wondering, from your point of view, what are some defining or memorable moments? Because you have so many.
Well, you mean as far as career is concerned? It's very simple. It's when I was two several defining moments. First defining moments was when I came to the United States from Israel. So that was a defining moment to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show. Those of you who don't know Ed Sullivan Show, he was sort of the most popular show when we're talking about the 19. I don't remember when he started, but I came to the States in 1958, and he had the most popular variety show, and his show was truly a variety show because he had monkeys dancing on a stick, and he had ballet dancers, and he had it was like anything would go, and he would mix it all up so you could hear. I remember listening to somebody tap dancing and then listening to Yehudi Menuhin at the same time, or listening to a fantastic Metropolitan Opera star, and then seeing puppets playing things. So it was really, so that was one defining moment. And another one, and the other one is for career, was the winning of the 11th RIT competition, which started me with getting management and starting to get concerts. So those were basically, I would say, if I think about it immediately, those were the two that started it off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how did you manage like having to play a different concerto every night and all the travel? And did you ever, get too tired? And where did you find inspiration when,
Look, first of all,
yeah.
when you're young, you can do so many things that you can't. Today I say, how could I have done that when I was like in my 20s? So, as far as playing concerts, that it's a question of what do you do as a student and how you handle learning the repertoire. And I'm sure you know yourself, that when you get to a point where you have like a bunch of concertos in your hands, in your fingers, so that when someone says, so and so canceled, would you do the Tchaikovsky concerto? And you say, yeah, I got that. Or, or in my case, uh, sometimes there were a few, actually, it was two or three mix-ups in repertoire where I would come to I remember I came I think it was in Hartford, Connecticut, and the conductor said to me, let's talk about the piece. And I said, oh, the Beethoven concerto, that's straightforward. He says, no, you're not playing the Beethoven concerto. I said, what do you mean? He says, you're playing the Sibelius concerto. Oh, well, I had the Sibelius concerto, so I played it. You know, in other words, you don't want to be caught off. Oh no, I don't. I haven't practiced that piece. You want to have it. You know, another one was, I think I was at the Hollywood Bowl. It's the same thing. I was supposed to play one piece, and then they said, no, you're playing the Tchaikovsky. Fine, you know, I've got that. So that's really, it has to do with the amassing amount of repertoire with concertos. And you don't need that many. If you've got 6 or 7, like bread and butter kind of concerti in your fingers, that, you know, you know, it's like somebody asks you to do it, and you can just, you know, go over it for an hour, and it's there. That's what helps. So, and that's what had to me. And of course, obviously, the recital programs, it's not a problem, because the recital program, you know, you do whatever you want to do. But when it comes to orchestra, you need to be prepared. So,
Speaking of which, can I ask you about your heroes or mentors?
well, you know, I always say that story, but I think it's good. When I was growing up, let's say from the age of, let's say, 14 and so on, I started to seriously listen to fiddle players, because before that, you know, up to 13, I didn't, you know, I was really, the radio was the only way of listening to anything, and I had not even a record player or anything like that. So when came to the States, finally got my first record player, where, you know, the needles, so you put the arm on the recording and stuff like that, and and I remember getting my first recording of the Paganini concerto with Zino Francescati, and that was the first, you know, the first fiddle player that I had on a record that I could actually play it over again and so on. And then other stuff came, and I started to listen to a lot of older violinists, you know, like Fritz Kreisler and Elman, and then later on Oistrakh and Stern, and of course Heifetz. Of course, we all listen to Heifetz. And so, in my case, each one of those, I had like a period of time where that's my hero. And then it graduated to another hero and so on. And you know, the trick is to make it like that's my hero and that's it, and there's nobody else. And then you become obsessed with this person's way of playing, and then you try to imitate and emulate and so on. And can be dangerous. Never forget, I always used to speak to Heifetz whenever I would come to play in the Los Angeles area. We used to meet and we used to talk. And you know, one time we talked about his, how he affected students at the Juilliard School. And I said that sometimes, you know, there was the Heifetz curse. And he said, why do you say that? I said, because somebody fell in love with the way you played, and that was all they thought about 25 hours a day. And then it became like, you know, the originality started to go away. And the trick is to listen to somebody and take stuff that you admire and make it your own. And so I had many of these. You know, I had my Chrysler period, my Oistrakh period, my Heifetz period. For Heifetz period, I actually had it was a very quick period, because he was such a dominant player that you didn't need to have a long, you know, association with this playing. I mean, it was just like that. But then I had the Oistrakh one where everything was beautiful vibrato and things like that he did, and Milstein, which had this incredible cleanliness and so on, and so on. So a lot of these kind of stayed with me for a while, and then they left. So I had many. If you ask how many heroes did I had many periodic heroes. You know.
I have a silly question for you that you might not have an answer to, but I grew up with your recordings of the Bach, complete Bach and Paganini, and I just remember I was just so captivated by your sound. Like before I knew anything about music, it was just like it was such a magnetic, golden, rich, buttery sound. How do you do that? Or do you actively work on that, or is it just a gift?
It's a good question. I think that the sound is what you have. You see, there are for me, there are two ways of describing a sound. We're talking about sound or we're talking about tone. Now, on sound, I think you can work on because it has to do with what happens technically with the bow. You know, what is the bow speed? How do you do with the sostenuto? Where is the point of contact and so on, so that you can produce a good, healthy sound. But when it comes to the quality of the tone, that I think is an individual thing. That I feel that it's, whatever you hear is what comes out. I don't know, when you listen, especially, I don't know if you agree with me, but if you were to listen to the old fiddle players of yesteryear, so let's name a few. So Elman, Chrysler, Heifetz, Francescatti, Oistrakh, Milstein, Stern. Any one of these fiddle players, they all sounded different. Their sound was totally different because it was what they heard. And so my argument is that it is an individual thing, and that you can only learn to produce not mechanically, but the kind of sound that's healthy sound has to do with the mechanical thing, the technical, what you do technically with the bow, and of course with the left hand when it comes to vibrato and stuff like that. But when it comes to the final thing as to what you hear, it's like a singer. When you have you can have two or three singers that have good good mechanical things that they use, diaphragm, how they use the way that they're singing, how they're coached. But when it comes to their actual voice, the voice is the voice. The voice is a different. When you listen to Pavarotti, it was one voice. If you listen to Domingo, it was another voice. Both fantastic, wonderful, great singers. Different voices. I think it's the same with playing the instrument.
Mhm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So I consider myself so lucky to have been included in the Perlman music program when I was 14, and I remember just being really overwhelmed by your and Mrs. P's generosity and involvement in everything, because I thought you might like pop out to play a concert here or there, but you were really, really there for us. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, when did you decide that you were gonna set aside so much time from your performing and touring and really devote yourself to teaching, and how has that affected your playing, or what does teaching mean to you?
Well, teaching, I've been teaching for quite a long time. I can't even remember when I started to teach. I started to teach, first time was at Brooklyn College. When I had, this was the pre-Juilliard thing. And so teaching was very much with me for a long, long time. And then it became more intense, and when I started the Juilliard, and then when Mrs. P told my wife, decided to start the Perlman music program, it was a very natural kind of segue, because it wasn't like, okay, now I'm going to start teaching, because I've been teaching before. I always felt, and I always feel right now, and I always try to instill this idea of any student that I teach, is never to to lose an opportunity to teach yourself. And I'm going to repeat the same thing I've repeated on many articles and many interviews ad nauseum. If you teach yourself, if you teach others, you teach yourself. And I found that teaching affected my playing very, very much, because it gave me a kind of an awareness as to what I was doing. And if something was not quite right, I knew what I was doing or what I was not doing. I was my own teacher. And so I always recommend to everybody, it doesn't matter on what level you teach. Teaching is just so important as a part of your development as an artist or as a musician. So I felt, and I do feel still, that, and in my case, even more important and even more difficult, teaching people who are talented. Because then, you have all that nightmare, before, I used to have nightmare before giving master classes. That's why I don't like to give master classes. Because usually master classes, somebody comes and starts to play for you, and they are really terrific, amazing. And then you say, Jeff, what am I going to say? Because I don't want to say it. It's still, at the Perlman Music Program, I do one master class every year for a quartet, for a chamber group. And the chamber groups there are so good. And that's when I say, what am I going to say, because I don't want to just pick on something just for the sake of knowing what to say. So I want to be helpful. So again, it makes you really think of musically what works, what doesn't work, what's the beautiful phrase, what makes a phrase successful or not. It's the same thing with with teaching. So it's all so important.
Speaking of teaching yourself, would you mind sharing a little bit about your practice routine?
Oh my God.
Do you have a practice routine?
There isn't any.
Yeah.
There isn't any. And no, really, there isn't any. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm practicing to make sure I can still play the violin. So that takes me about 5 minutes to convince myself that everything is fine. I can still play. My routine, I can tell you what my routine used to be, which was when I was growing up. My practice was 3 hours a day. That's basically was. I never practiced more than 3 hours a day, with the exception of the summer. And went to used to go to Meadow Mountain and so on. And there, everybody practiced 5 hours. So I was shamed into practicing 5 hours instead of 3. And the routine was always very scales. First hour was scales, second hour was etudes, and the third hour was repertoire. And that was it. So when I practiced a little longer, then it was maybe a more time spent maybe on repertoire, but it was always scales and exercises, scales and etudes the first couple of hours. And
Wow.
yeah, and I'll tell you the old story that probably has been reported on any media, whatever it is the story of my first playing for Yasha Heifetz, and I played for him. I remember I played for him a movement of the Symphony Espagnole of Lalo, and then I played the Paganini Caprice, and I remember Mr. Galamian, who was my teacher at the time, said, "Thank you very much, you can go." And Heifetz says, "Not so fast. I want to hear some scales." And I played scales, in Israel. My old teacher, she had a Russian background, and she believed that's where I got the routine of the scales and the etudes and so on. So I knew my scales just like that. So I said, "What would you like to hear?" And he said, "Oh, how about F sharp minor in thirds or in sixths or whatever it is, And I just knew the whole thing. I did it first, third, sixth octaves, double stops, arpeggios, and so on. That impressed him. The way I played was okay, but that impressed him. So that was my routine all the time, and it really, believe me, it's I can recommend it to everybody.
Very, very cool. Um, okay, some sillier questions. What are some hobbies and passions outside of the violin? Because I know you're also the ones I know about. You're also a virtuoso singer, right, and chef. And
I'm not, believe me, I'm not a virtuoso singer. I sang, my career as a singer is extremely short. I basically two performances that I mean, what other person's career you can say, well, I performed twice. Well, I can tell you that I performed twice, and it was the same repertoire. It was the role of the jailer in Tosca, and one time it was with Pavarotti, and the other one was with the Domingo. Two pretty good tenors, and that was the end of my career. The second one was I always called it my farewell debut. so, so that was it. But as a chef, I'm not really a chef. I'm a great food enthusiast, and I do some cooking, and I it's a great hobby, and unfortunately this summer I've been exposed to that hobby overly. People always tell you that you should wear in this pandemic that you should wear face masks, but in our house we wear face masks so that we won't eat as much. That's the reason, because we've been here all the time. But so I like I'm a sports fan, although right now I'm a New York Mets fan, and it's now very 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 uh, painful to be a New York Mets fan because they're not doing very well. But we do that. Mrs. P and I will always watch the baseball, and we do the cooking, and I do a little bit of practicing, but and that's it. And then I realize these days how much I don't know about the internet and about what makes a computer work and so on. So I've been exposed to that because of all the streaming and all the things that you have to do and all the mechanics and stuff. So I realize how much I don't know. So I'm learning a little bit of that, and that's it. And shopping, of course, for food. It's all back to the food.
um, do you have any advice for aspiring young musicians? General advice.
General advice. General advice is to, if you love what you do, and if you are, and I'm assuming that you do, and you call yourself a musician, there are so many things that you can do in music that you should not have blinders that would uh, say, if I cannot do this, then I can't do anything else. There's so many things that you can do. Whether it's playing concertos with orchestra, or whether it's teaching, or whether it's playing chamber music, or whether it's, I don't know, being a part of a festival. I always say that we're so lucky to be in this music field, although these days we are not. These days we are not lucky. These days we are in real trouble. I don't like to sound pessimistic, but people don't talk enough about how the music field is really in deep trouble, more than other fields, because we don't have a lot of flexibility. The only thing that we can do is, do streaming on the internet and so on. But what performing musicians need, whatever they do, whether they're playing an orchestra, whether they play chamber music, or whether they do concerts, solo recital and so on, we need an audience. And we don't have the audience because of the pandemic. We cannot, that's the problem. They are starting very slowly in Europe, and I was talking to an acquaintance, a musician, and he said, "Oh, I played a concert." Yeah, I said, "How was? Did you play in front of an audience?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how was it?" He said, "Well, it sounded like it was like a concert that was very badly advertised, meaning that there was nobody there. In other words, they let you, if you have a hall that seats, let's say 2,000 people, you can, with social distancing, seat more than maybe 100
Mhm.
or 150 and so on. So for organizations that rely on existing by selling tickets, and it's a catastrophe. And so I'm just hoping that we get a vaccine. But right now, well, we musicians need help. We need we need help, financial help, because a lot of organizations are closing down. And when you think about musicians that rely on either freelance jobs or chamber music concerts or whatever it is, they're in trouble. They're absolutely in trouble. So this time is very, very difficult, very, very difficult time, and the question of how long you can last, because and you think about it, what a wonderful, wonderful profession art is, and music is, but right now this profession is in big trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you don't get nervous anymore, but how did you have a period of dealing with nerves? And if so, how did you do that? Did you have a pre-concert routine, things like that?
Well, I did used to get nervous, then I started to get nervous. Dealing with nerves is, um, the nerves are very weird. Uh, I find, and I don't know whether you found yourself, your own experience as a violinist, is that, when you about to go on stage and play, sometimes there are two scenarios. You say, this is great, no problem, I'm going to just do it and play. And then you go on the stage and all of a sudden, like the nerves just start to go and it's totally unexpected. Or a different scenario, I don't know, I'm so nervous, I don't know what's going to happen. You go on the stage and everything just goes smoothly. So nerves are kind of unexpected. But to deal with nerves, I think the only way to do it is to be familiar with them. To know that each one of us has a different way of responding to nerves. So if you're familiar with the way you respond, or the way I respond, the way somebody responds, people sometimes respond by playing too fast, or sometimes they respond by hands shaking, sometimes they respond by too fast the vibrato and so on. If you know that that's what it is, it gets you familiar with what it is, so that it doesn't come as a surprise. And I think that's more of a problem, that it comes as a surprise. I mean, look, everybody has their own kind of point of view about it. Some people says, "No, that's funny. I don't feel that way." Or some people can say, "Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about." So it's, the nerves is, again, it's a very personal thing. Uh, and But for me, familiarizing with how you react, a lot of the time, I think it's very important to, when you're really, really nervous, to concentrate very, very much on the music. To see, what I mean, to start to phrase better. To see, let's see how am I going to do this diminuendo? How am I going to do the timing of this phrase? And maybe every now and then you'll forget about the nerves, because sometimes if you get the nerves, they have a way of developing, and sort of, it becomes worse and worse. So that's why you have to kind of get your mind off of it, trying by concentrating something really positive. I don't know if that works, but that's a suggestion.
Yeah. 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 Okay. I remember that maybe 10 years ago, you told me that Beethoven and Elgar Concerti are at the top of your list. Is that still true? What are your favorite pieces? What are your favorite composers?
Elgar is pretty good, but Beethoven there's Beethoven, you know.
Yeah.
And it's you know it's a fantastic, it's a funny piece, that concerto, because it's like because right now a couple of my students are studying it, and so I'm restudying it by teaching it. It's it's so simple. I mean, it's like, you know, arpeggios, scales, you know. So what do you do? So yeah, you know you're the pacing and the timing of this piece, so important. How do you pace it? And and how do you, where do you sing? Where do you not sing? Where do you express something? Where do you do, how do you do something that will not sound romantic but yet sound classical and sound convincing? It's a real challenge, and whenever a student starts to play the concerto, I say to them, "Welcome to a journey of a lifetime," because you know you can start and it can be up to a point pretty good, and then the next year, there are more challenges. How to make this piece sound right, and I'm talking about right in quotes, because that piece can sound so wrong, even though you play all the notes, even though you play. You know, we haven't even actually mentioned intonation. Well, the most important intonation challenge is this piece, because there's no little things where you can hide behind the chords or behind an orchestra. You know, when you go da 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 da, it's gotta be perfectly in tune, because if it's not, it can be very, very musical. And if the intonation is no good, it misses something. But of course, intonation is important for everything. It's just that it's more obvious in a concerto like Beethoven, or even things like Mozart or Mendelssohn, you know, where it's so important just for everything to be perfectly in tune.
Okay, very last question. What have been your most memorable concerts?
Oh God, I don't know. Memorable concerts. Well, I mean, well, I suppose memorable performances. You can say there are a lot, you know, in well, playing for Obama's inauguration, pretty memorable. Playing the first time in Israel, uh, when, you know, I left Israel as a student and I came back to Israel to play as a performing violinist. So that was important. Going to the Soviet Union, playing there. Uh, Memorable concert. First sort of debut at Carnegie Hall, when I was playing Wieniawski F sharp minor with a you know, at that time, you know, today I would say, what? Debut? Wieniawski F sharp minor? But at that time, you know, I was 17 years old, you know. Wieniawski F sharp minor, fine, I'll play that. And so on. So that was pretty memorable. So many, so many. It's you know, you shouldn't ask somebody of my age what's memorable. First of all, I don't even remember anything. I'm so old. Who remembers? But quite a few anyway.
So thank you, Mr. P,
Well,
so much.
I hope you have a good concert in Armenia, and I hope that you play. You know, I mean, do they have their the same problems with social distancing in the audience and stuff?
I believe it's going to be a recorded concert, no audience. I think there's going to be a masterclass of some sorts with social distancing and all of that. But you
You
know,
know,
our lives are
can
just.
you play this piece over again? What did you say? Can you play it over again, please? A little faster. What? So, you know, I always say that social distancing can be translated in music. Like when you play something that has a rest, it should have four rests instead of one rest. So if ba-da-ba-da-bum, ba-da-ba-da-bum in the Beethoven, so it should be ba-da-ba-da-bum, 2, 3, 4, ba-da-ba-da-bum, 2, 3. Never mind.
It'll take a while.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Well, thank you so much
right.
for doing this interview with me, and
Okay.
thank you all for watching.
All right.
Right. Thank you,
Right.
Mr.
Thank you
P.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching. Hope you guys have a great day.